Good morning and welcome to another webinar brought to you by ClearedJobs.Net. My name is Kathleen Smith and I am the Chief Outreach Officer here at ClearedJobs.Net. We are a veteran-owned company and a job board job fair company hoping to help security cleared job seekers and cleared facilities employers connect. Today we are talking about virtual interviewing. In this world of the pandemic, we have had to shift from having job fairs and face-to-face interviews to doing them all online. We have done other videos and other webinars going over how to prepare and participate in a virtual job fair and how to do your overall job search. So today's installment, we are talking about virtual interviewing and the things that you need to think about to make sure that you are successful in a virtual interview. So I'm going to have each one of our panelists introduce themselves and talk to us a little bit about the kind of recruiting they do. Victoria, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I am a lead recruiter with PAE. I have been working with this industry for, I think, over 10 years now, primarily Department of Justice work, but I actually manage a team of up to 13, maybe even 14 recruiters at a time. So it's always super busy, but have been enjoying doing specifically government contract recruiting. It's its own animal, and but it's very enjoyable and very mission focused.
Wonderful. Samantha, a little bit about you.
I'm Samantha Farnsworth. I have been a recruiter now for almost 10 years. I'm a principal recruiter here at SAIC, supporting and recruiting for all cleared positions, TS and above, for our national security group.
Great. So we've had to shift from doing face-to-face interviews, and while these are now being done virtually, we can't just sort of say, hey, we're going to be just sitting behind a computer and it's not as important as a face-to-face interview. It's actually a little bit more. So what are some of the best ways to prepare for the virtual interview? Samantha, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So you want to make sure that you check your internet connectivity first and foremost. Confirm your camera and microphone are working. When testing your technology, you want to make sure that you find a room with optimal lighting, preferably by a window. Make sure you tidy up your surroundings. You want to make sure that your TV's turned off, you close your email, you silence your phone, minimize any other background distractions. And I definitely recommend a quick test run before you interview.
All great points. Victoria, what are some of the other ways that are good ways to prepare for the virtual interview?
Yeah, no, and to kind of go on from more of the technical standpoint of making sure that you prepare and have your environment set up for it ahead of time. Just what you would normally do in an interview. Make sure you review the job requirements, duties, how they relate to your experience. I personally would like to write things down because it helps me memorize and better articulate during a conversation, and have that kind of readily available, whether it's in front of you, preferably so that you don't look away from the camera. I've also heard if you need kind of a pinpoint to make sure you continue to look directly into the camera, maybe put a sticker next to where that point is so you can have a focus as well.
All really great points. I think the other thing that you both sort of touched on was making sure that you do a dry run. So I think that practicing doing a virtual interview is a really great step to get on the call with, find out which technology is it? Is it Google Meetings? Is it Zoom? Is it GoToWebinar? Is it any of these? And do a test run so that you do know what your lighting is like. You do know what it is to look directly into the camera, that you definitely know that it's going to work for you, because sometimes people do get on these calls and they find out that they've accidentally muted their microphone. They can't figure out why they can't get it going on. I think some of the other things are making sure you have your resume right in front of you, because having the resume that you submitted really helps you sort of solidify the fact of the talking points that you're going to be going over. So Samantha, do you want to kick off sort of talking about some of the best practices in a virtual interview? Now, really, we're going to be doing an interview. We're going to be doing it virtually. So there are some things that make an interview very successful, but then also how can the virtual interview be successful?
Absolutely. So you want to make sure, again, that you test your technology. You want to prepare your interview space. You want to, make sure that you're presenting yourself and you're setting yourself up for success. You want to remember your body language. That's very important. When you're in a video meeting, it's easy to get distracted by email, by pets, whatever else is going on in this crazy world at the moment. But you want to be intentional. You want to connect. You do want to look into the camera. You just want to make sure that you're giving regular eye contact, maintaining that good positive body language. You want to be an active listener. You want to make sure that you're answering the questions that are being asked. Many of us attend regular multi-conference calls, and it's easy to get distracted and not listen actively. So you just want to make sure that you're listening. And then it's also be friendly, generate a good conversation, be more casual, and just make sure that you are presenting yourself in the best possible way and not repeating yourself. That's also a good point.
So Victoria, what are some of the success measures within participating within the the virtual interview?
You know what, and I always like to prepare, and a lot of my team prepare our interviewees beforehand, and just knowing, who you're speaking, who you're going to be speaking with, and we try to make sure we provide as much information to our interviewees beforehand so they're prepared as well. So I always say, if you have questions, concerns, reach out to your recruiter. They're kind of your best link to the company to prepare yourself for that. And of course, treat it like, any other interview, dress the part, be professional, and, just make sure that you can relate your previous experience like you would in a normal interview to the job, and make that link and connection for why I think you should hire me and that I can perform this job well.
Victoria, Samantha, I'm going to throw a curveball at you and ask you a question that we didn't prepare for, which is, are there any really interesting questions you've ever heard from a job seeker as far as in the interview? Because, we all think of interviews as sort of the standard, well, what is the job about? And what are the roles and responsibilities? And who am I going to report to? But this interview is really a time to sort of dig deeper into that. Are there any sort of like really thought-provoking questions you've ever had? Victoria, you're grinning.
Well, I mean, sometimes we almost forget to discuss, like, what happens when they actually are there. Like, what is the work environment like? What is kind of the expectations for day to day? And it might be a little bit different now. And what might come up more is this going to be, how are we going to kind of, once I'm hired, am I going to work remote now? Or is there going to be a transition back to being, in an office space? So I definitely have been more in tune with those questions, because it is a little bit different now, and we're not 100% sure how things are going to change. And as a recruiter, I want to make sure that the candidate is prepared for, maybe working remotely at first and then transitioning back into an office environment. And every office is different. I mean, am I going to be a desk space in an open area? How can I prepare them for what would happen after they're hired?
Samantha, any thought-provoking questions you've been asked during an interview?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been asked, what are you looking for in a candidate? What are you looking for this person, to come on board and bring to the table? I think that's very important. And to piggyback off of Victoria, it's a very interesting time where a lot of the work that I recruit for, you have to work on site. There is no telework. There's no working from home at all. So it's an interesting situation now where, folks are worried and nervous because everyone that I'm hiring is going into the office. So it's just making sure that they understand the environment, the culture that is changing now, obviously. So just being well prepared and knowing what the office space is looking like right now, so I can prepare the candidate for their first day, and as long as they're with us. So yeah, I think just being able to empathize and understand where they're coming from as well. So yeah.
So Samantha, I'm just going to piggyback off of a comment you said there. So you're supporting clients that are working on site, and usually as part of the interview process, there is an interview with the client, and the client does have some say in the hiring. They more than likely have the final say. Are those client site, are those interviews happening on site, or are they happening virtually?
All of our interviews are virtually now. So we're hiring off of all virtual interviews. Yes.
So even your client is doing the virtual interviews.
Yes.
Awesome. So that gives the job seekers more opportunities to interview with the clients and know exactly what kind of environment they're going into, rather than having to do a face-to-face interview. One of my favorite questions to ask is, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when they're in an interview or a virtual interview? We always end up with some fascinating stories that come up, or just things that I never would have thought of would be a mistake. But we all get nervous in an interview. We all get, especially in this new environment, we have so many different parameters that we're not used to. Samantha, what's a common mistake that you've seen job seekers make in a virtual interview?
I think just not knowing about the company and what the mission is, and not knowing what the job description is, or just not really truly understanding the role. I think that that's important, and I think for the recruiter should definitely set that candidate up for success before the interview and go through all of that with them, so that they are prepared. But another thing, you definitely don't want to ramble on. You don't want to tell stories. You just want to answer the questions. Don't wander off on a tangent. Try not to repeat yourself. That's very important. Not maintaining eye contact. You just want to make sure you are looking at the person. And again, not asking questions pertaining to the company or the position. So you want to make sure that you're direct. I think those are that's important.
Victoria, any mistakes that you've seen?
Lighting's always a big one. Maybe they can't really see the candidate, and vice versa. Even for the hiring managers, I have to kind of coach them a little bit on making sure they're in a well lit room. Inside lights probably usually the best way to make sure that you can be seen, and and that helps you connect with the person you're talking to as well. And just making sure you practice and be prepared. And of course, things do happen if you're disconnected or anything does occur with your technology. Always quickly contact your recruiter and let them know what happened, and try to reschedule.
That sounds great. I think that we've heard this a lot, that technology, as more and more people become on Zoom or any of the platforms, we're overloading the internet. And what's interesting is one day the platform will work really great, and then the next day when you're on the interview, it doesn't work. So be sure that you have the contact information of your recruiter and of the person that you're interviewing with, so that you can at least email or text to say, internet was working yesterday, but it's not working today. Can we reschedule? I'm having problems, letting them know. One of the questions that we have from the audience is, should people be dressing a little less formally, or should they be dressing formally for their interviews? Victoria?
I mean, for me personally, I would dress like I would in a normal interview. It might also depend on the job you're interviewing for as well, what the expectation might be. Maybe if you're interviewing for a leadership role, you probably want to stick to standard interview procedures. But I mean, it's probably better to be overdressed than underdressed. And I always, tell my candidates that as well. Especially if they are meeting with clients, definitely our government clients, they definitely want to make sure that they are dressed appropriately in interview attire.
Samantha, anything you want to add to that?
Yes.
Big earrings, not big earrings. What are we talking about?
I'd be very simple, very business, definitely business attire. Keep the jewelry very simple. The background should be simple wherever you're sitting. Again, no distractions. But yes, I would definitely dress professional for all virtual interviews. Absolutely.
We actually had this come up for our virtual job fairs, that some people actually do have video capability inside some of the virtual. So sometimes you're not quite sure if you're going to be in text or on video. So it's always good, no matter what interaction you're going to have, to at least have some kind of professional attire on, because you're never sure if you're going to have a chat interview or if you're going to have a video interview. But this brings up another question from our audience, which is, if they have a choice? Can they request to do a phone interview versus a video interview? Meaning that they've tried video interviewing, but they don't have a place to be private. They don't think they have really good internet connection. At what point do we move from just a phone call into a video? Samantha, you want to take that first?
Absolutely. I think sure. I think you should definitely let the recruiter know that you're unable to do a video virtual interview and you prefer a phone, and then see what the hiring manager says. I mean, it's really up to them and the customer. So again, it's going to be case by case, but I would definitely ask the recruiter, and 100% I would advocate for the candidate and just be like, hey, unfortunately, that they really would prefer a phone. They're not able to do a virtual, and just see what they say. But ultimately, it's going to be up to them. So it's case by case.
Victoria, what about you?
I think it depends case by case, like Samantha said. I have situations where we have candidates that will be interacting with our clients directly. Maybe it's a high visibility position. So sometimes we do advocate for virtual interviews for that case, so we can interview them first and then prepare them for a virtual interview with our customer. But I do have some managers that still do prefer phone interviews. We do some hiring across the United States, so sometimes we actually are very used to doing phone interviews instead of bringing people in. So it depends on the position and the hiring manager preference. But if the candidate is not able to do a virtual interview, we try to work with them to see if we can work with our manager on other options. I've had some folks that maybe might not have a laptop access, that maybe prefer to use phone, and maybe we'll change the platform if there's one that's easier to use as well.
Yeah, I think that is one thing that we're all learning, is that there are many different platforms, and each one of them interact with different internet providers. So it's quite a jigsaw puzzle that we're all working with right now. So we've prepared for the interview, we've participated, we've made sure that we're dressed professionally, that we don't have any distractions. We think that the interview went well. What are the follow-up steps? I mean, there are several. A lot of people just think that they're turning off their computer or hanging up the phone and that's it. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than just, hey, waiting for the phone call. What are some of the things that the job seeker can do as the follow-up for the interview? Victoria?
I mean, a lot of our candidates do, if they do have contact information with the hiring manager, we'll follow up with a quick email, just thanking them for their time. And then maybe, mention why they were super interested in the opportunity and the position, kind of reflect on their conversation. Sometimes they'll come through me, the recruiter, and I'll either pass on or connect them to the hiring manager. But it's also might be good to have maybe an idea of some follow-up questions. What the anticipated time frame is going to be to get a response or feedback as well. and I'm kind of looking at it as, if I were a candidate in that seat as well. But definitely reach out to your recruiter. But in most cases, the recruiter will probably be reaching out to them to see how it went. I like to get, their perspective in the interview, as well as the hiring manager, so I can, answer any questions on both ends and then follow up appropriately with them.
Samantha, anything else?
Yes, I would definitely just like Victoria said, send an email right away, right after your interview. If you did get the hiring manager's email, please send it, directly to them. I would also call the recruiter to follow up to see what, if they receive feedback, get feedback from them, what are next steps, what's the time frame, how many other folks are interviewing. I think it's good to know all of that when you're in a position for a job, just to kind of know, okay, they're going to be hiring as soon as possible. You're the last person. Okay, great. Or, we're going to interview a lot more people or a few more people. So just so you know kind of what the time frame is, that's important for the candidate.
Would you recommend that the candidate reach out and connect with the hiring manager on LinkedIn? Samantha?
I would ask the recruiter. Absolutely. I think so. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
And I want to delve a little deeper into thank you notes, because I know that this is something that always comes up. And I am always amazed at how many times job seekers do not send a thank you note. And I know when I talk to recruiters, they can count on one hand how many times they've gotten a thank you note. So Victoria, do you want to just sort of walk us through what would be a really short, sweet 2 or 3 points you would bring up in a thank you email?
You just keeping it short and just letting them know they appreciate that you appreciate the time that they took to interview you. Just that you're looking forward for feedback, and if there's any questions, additional questions that you can answer for the hiring manager, that you're more than happy to have a follow-up conversation with them. So it kind of leads to, I want to continue this conversation with you. I'm very interested, and it might help you get a little push in the right direction, because you're kind of maybe you're the only one that sent a thank you note.
That's a very good point. That's how I got my house. I was the only person who toured the house, and I actually sent a thank you note to the people who were selling the house. So
I did too recently.
So I think that the other thing is making sure that everyone is thanked. The other aspect is what is the proper timeline for follow-up? Because I know some people will call right away and then they'll keep calling. Samantha, do you want to sort of give us how often should a candidate be following up afterwards?
Sure. So I would definitely send a thank you note the same day that you interviewed, thanking them for their time. Was really the most important thing, and that you're very interested in the position. And then I would also follow up with the recruiter the same day. And then I would, if you don't hear anything, I'd follow up within a week. I think a week is a good amount of time. So definitely for a second follow-up.
Well, we've run out of any questions that we have from the audience. I think you guys have done a great job covering the topic and giving everyone some really great information. We all want to prepare for the virtual interview by making sure our technology is great. We want to make sure we're formally dressed, and we also want to make sure that we know about the company and the position and which one of our resumes that we submitted into that position. Participating, we really don't want to have any distractions. We want to look directly at the camera and keep eye contact, not be fidgeting, really being engaged into the conversation. And finally, as far as following up with the event, we want to make sure we send a thank you note to the recruiter who did the interviewing and the hiring manager who did the interviewing, and then waiting about another week to do the follow-up. Samantha, Victoria, so great to talk with you this morning. Really appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next virtual career fair.